Hello and welcome to the channel, it's the Eradicator, and today we'll have a very special video as I am going to do something I haven't done since my younger days at university, because I'm going to review for you guys a book, and not just any book. It's a book that I think makes sense for this channel since it aims at attracting a general audience interested in gaming, and so we'll be reviewing Game Artist: The Ultimate Career Guide, written by Cloud Imperium game art director Paul Jones, which I just finished reading and I found absolutely fascinating. Now, just to make it clear, this is not a sponsored video. In fact, I have never had any contacts with Cloud Imperium Games, the studio behind Star Citizen, in any capacity, except for them following me on Twitch. Yay! But that's about it. What you are going to hear here are always my genuine impressions and feelings, and why I think you should read this book if you're interested in not just being a game artist, but gaming in general, because this book covers a lot of behind-the-scenes aspect that you'd normally never think of. So, the first thing I'm going to say about this book is that I really appreciated that Paul Jones makes no concessions. He goes all in a no bullshit approach about what works and what doesn't, what are the do's and don'ts of the profession, and what the industry's expectations versus what would be the general audience's perceived expectations are. Just to give you an example, at the beginning, the author says straight to our faces that recruiters do not care about our gender, religion, and other kinds of preferences, and that the only thing that matters is talent, work, and dedication. And I was so happy to read this, especially in this day and age in which so many people on social media give so much importance to such trivial details that are and should remain private and thus unrelated to a professional environment. I think that Paul Jones was very wise to include this particular passage at the start of the book because it sets the tone from the beginning. There is no complacence, there is no compromise, there's only going to be the truth, and to me at least, doing so made me proceed with the reading with serenity, knowing that the author's work and intent were genuine and that there's no other intention here than educating us about the gaming industry. The next element that I think is really important for this book is how Jones compares the points of views and approaches of both sides of the mirror. The candidate versus the recruiter, the interviewee versus the interviewer, the junior employee versus the senior staff, the supervisor versus the manager, and the manager versus the director. In fact, the author himself has climbed all the steps of the ladder to get to the very top that allows him to share information and, dare I say, wisdom that would otherwise not have the same credibility if they were coming from someone a bit younger or less experienced. And the most interesting part about all of this is that you don't have to be yourself in the gaming industry or trying to make it into the gaming industry to appreciate the experience shared throughout the 394 pages of the book. For example, when Jones goes into the details about the recruitment process, he compares how and why recruiters decide to hire the services of headhunters and why and how this ultimately benefits candidates. He just doesn't give us facts and anecdotes. He actually goes further by actually interviewing actual people specialized in their particular fields, in this case a headhunter specialized in recruiting game artists. And so throughout this interview we go much deeper into not only the process and methods but also the psychology involved as well as the human approach, and all of a sudden what was a two-sided story between an employee and a candidate enters into a three-way dimension, which I thought was very interesting because we naturally tend to focus on our own side only, and eventually the side of the recruiter, as for most people, myself including, trying to put ourselves into the shoes of another party is always a perilous exercise. And by giving us these different perspectives, I really think that Paul Jones is going to help a lot of job candidates, not just gaming candidates, but candidates in general who read this book, to perform better and go to the next step, which is the interview, from which we are given a lot of information too. By now, you've probably guessed, as you'd expect from a seasoned veteran professional, that there are a lot of career advice that would apply to every profession and not just game artists. I particularly appreciated the coverage of some particular aspects dealing with the fear of failing, the syndrome of the imposter, or how to handle leaving your company for another. These are situations that I have encountered myself and that I am sure a lot of you have or will encounter. And personally, if I had the chance to be given some of those advices earlier in my career, there are certainly a handful of mistakes that I made that I would have avoided. I am also certain, as a result, that what I read will help me quite a bit, as there is right now no one in my career that can fulfill the role of mentor, that can provide that oh so much needed guidance that can determine whether or not you'll be successful in your position. I particularly had a good laugh when Paul Jones evokes how advice from your coworkers should be received, especially when it comes from people he calls KIAs or know-it-alls, as I am certainly one of these people. I really appreciated not being alienated and even valued for what I can bring, being this kind of person despite how annoying it can sometimes be to others. And I thought that this really highlighted the benevolent approach of this book, which is really not here to point figures at, but to help everyone make the best of the situations they encounter. Another point that I've found interesting, being an international professional myself, is how the author talked about his experience as an expatriate, moving his family from his home country to a completely different continent. In a globalized world like today's, even during our current pandemic era, there are plenty of companies that seek talents from all over the world, and having been through that process of moving from one country to another multiple times in my life, including moving from Paris to Taipei with my wife and children, I can guarantee that the advice Paul Jones gives in this book are definitely helpful and will prepare you mentally, at least, for such a move that will completely change your life. Having spent more than half of my life as an expatriate myself, I have met plenty of people who were not ready for this, who then fell in depression, got divorced, or lost their jobs. In this book, Paul Jones will help you through his own experience to get ready and embrace such change with serenity and confidence. And if you are contemplating an international career, I think that the passages that cover this particular topic will be well worth reading. Of course, we can't talk about a guide to a career path without talking about money, and again, Paul Jones does not spare any details here, whether we are talking about salary disparities between regions or between employees of the same rank within the same office. I will obviously not go into the details here as it will be spoiling the book, but yes, we get to know in details why it is not proper to talk salary between co-workers in what was, in my opinion, one of the most revealing segments of the entire book. Now, before we finish, I couldn't review this book without talking about the game development, and at the least I'm going to say is that the more I progressed throughout my reading, the more I realized how little I knew about game development. But after reading the book, I think that I have a much better understanding of the various stages through which a game goes from its original idea all the way to its post-release phase. There's an entire 62-page long section within the book which goes in details featuring graphs and figures to help us, the readers, visualize and better comprehend the whole process. And next time I see a little alpha or pre-alpha disclaimer at the bottom part of the trailer footage, I think I'll be much more aware of how far along the game is, and I'm looking forward to put into practice this new insight actually. And finally, we'll talk about how the book itself is organized, and I think that every video game lover will appreciate how it is divided into levels, just like how old school games in the 16-bit era and before used to be. It may be a detail, but moving on from level 1 to level 2 and onwards did feel satisfactory, giving me glimpses of old vibes from these old times, and I thought it was a nice touch. I also liked that each part ends with a recap of the key elements that were covered. The way Paul Jones presented them kind of reminded me of how these are presented in keynote presentations with short bullet points, and in the end, I really think that it really helped memorizing or remembering the points that were elaborated. And so, these are my thoughts about Game Artist, the Ultimate Career Guide. I thought you guys would appreciate the feedback about this rare, full-on, unfiltered testimony about the gaming industry and what it takes to make it as a game artist. I personally learned a lot, not just about the job itself, but about the psychology behind it, as well as how hierarchies in larger companies operate. I generally appreciated the reality check on my shortcomings in my understanding of game development, and I think that in the end I have become more appreciative of the work done by all of the talented people who work behind the scenes, and that on its own was worth the $12 I spent on the book. But let me know in the comment section down below. Do you have any other books you'd recommend from game developers? Are you familiar with Paul Jones and his work? Are you a Star Citizen backer perhaps? Or an aspirant game artist? I'd like to know everything. Also, if you think I've done a good job at reviewing this book, please consider leaving a like, or even better, smash that subscribe button, as 85.5% of my viewers are not subscribed according to my analytics, so it would really help the channel a lot. Coming up next, we'll have more videos popping up, including a piece on the newly announced Star Wars Eclipse. You don't want to miss this one out. I wish you all a great day. Thank you so much for watching. This is the Eradicator. I'll see you guys later. A huge shout out to everyone who's been helping me out on Patreon and via the YouTube Joint membership program. Creating content on YouTube involves continuous circles of ups and downs, and it is when we are the lower parts of the curve that your help really motivates me to keep on going. Your contribution really does make a difference, which is why in return I try to give back by offering backers access to my private Discord channel, automatic access to exclusive giveaways, or answering your questions during the show. You can help me out with as little as $1 a month, and any help is greatly appreciated. Thank you very much for watching again. This is the Eradicator. I'll see you guys later.